The following entry into the DreamWorks Diaries contains footage from the film being discussed, which is used solely for the purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Please support the animators by watching this film on home media or streaming services where available, and this entry also contains spoilers throughout.
Dear Diary, today I found myself thinking again about the Prince of Egypt. Every time I revisit that film, something in it seems to speak directly to the heart. One moment that always stays with me is when Moses hears the words, "Who made man's mouth? Who made the deaf, the mute, the seeing, and the blind? Did not I? Now go!" That moment captures something so human. The fear of not being enough, and the quiet courage it takes to move forward anyway. In many ways, Moses' journey reminds me of my own path since I was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in December 2015. Faith hasn't always meant having perfect confidence. Sometimes it has meant walking forward while still feeling uncertain. Yet somehow, step by step, I felt guided along the way. That feeling often brings to mind my favourite scripture, Psalm 23:4. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." Those words have always felt deeply reassuring to me. They remind me that even when the path feels dark or unclear, I am not walking it alone. Another moment in The Prince of Egypt that always resonates with me is the song "When You Believe," and the line, "There can be miracles when you believe, though hope is frail, it's hard to kill." That lyric captures something I felt throughout my years in the church. When I chose to be baptized, I didn't suddenly gain all the answers. What I gained instead was hope, a quiet but persistent hope that God knows me and is guiding my life. Sometimes the journey of faith feels a little like Moses leaving the palace. He had to step away from the life he knew to discover who he was truly meant to be. In my own way, choosing faith has meant growing, learning, and sometimes stepping into unfamiliar places spiritually. But through it all, the words of Psalm 23 remind me that God walks beside me, even in the valleys. The film ends with Moses leading his people toward the promised land. But what always strikes me is that the journey isn't finished when the sea parts. It's only beginning. In the same way, my baptism in 2015 wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of a lifelong journey of faith, repentance, learning, and drawing closer to Heavenly Father. Stories like The Prince of Egypt remind me that God works through ordinary, imperfect people. Moses doubted himself, yet he still answered the call. Remembering that gives me hope that I can keep trying too, one step at a time, trusting that even through the valleys, the Lord is leading me somewhere good. And I leave these things in the name of thy Saviour Jesus Christ. Amen. How else was I going to finish that diary entry? So yeah, this is a big one today, folks. No pressure. So, that being said, hello my fellow DreamWorks fans and welcome to the DreamWorks Diaries, where each diary entry is about DreamWorks animation. I'm the writer of those diaries, Kenzie, and today, oh boy, this is gonna be a biggie. This is only the second entry into these DreamWorks Diaries, and we already have, for me, one of the best animated films ever made. Today, this could either go one of two ways. Either it's gonna go really, really well, or it's gonna go really, really badly. And I know there's a lot of you out there that are either religious, that know me, or both through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So anyway, here we go. Today, we are going to be looking at The Prince of Egypt, which is inspired by the story of Moses found in the book of Exodus in the Old Testament of the Bible. And this film also released in 1998, just a few months after Ants. This is without question one of the greatest animated films ever made. Something like this had been in the works since the studio was founded, and The Prince of Egypt marked a bold new chapter for DreamWorks Animation, blending hand-drawn artistry with cutting-edge digital effects. The film is a retelling of the biblical story of Moses and the 10 Plagues, and it was a project long envisioned by Jeffrey Katzenberg, which he first pitched the idea of during his time at Disney. And with the founding of DreamWorks alongside Steven Spielberg and David Geffen, he finally had the creative freedom to bring this epic story to the screen. And from the outset, authenticity and artistry were at the heart of the production. And this is part of it is down to the animation team, which consisted of over 350 animators or artists from more than 30 countries. And they embarked on extensive research trips to Egypt and Death Valley to capture the landscapes, architecture, and the light of the ancient world. Character designs balanced historical accuracy with expressive animation, while the animators combined traditional techniques with pioneering CGI to achieve the film's iconic sequences, including the unforgettable parting of the Red Sea. The result was a visually stunning, emotionally resonant epic that pushed the boundaries of animated filmmaking and brought a timeless story to life for a new generation. Now, I've got my scriptures handy here. And this particular set is the quad for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, consisting of the Bible itself, the Old Testament and New Testament, the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. That particular quad I have had with me since I got baptized into the church in December 2015. So, story time about my journey into the church. So here we go. Thanks to Elder Blettenberg and Elder Stops, who I met in town one afternoon with one of my friends. They gave us both a copy of the Book of Mormon, told us a bit about the church, went on their way. Elder Blettenberg felt this spiritual prompting to come back and speak to me some more about the church. We exchanged contact details, had my first lesson with him a couple of weeks later, and went to church that following Sunday. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've had those scriptures with me ever since. And honestly, one of the best decisions I've ever made. The production team alongside Katzenberg conferred with roughly 600 religious experts to make this movie as accurate and faithful to the original story as possible. And after previewing the developing movie, all of the religious scholars, experts, and leaders associated in the making of this movie noted that the studio executives listened and responded to their ideas, and praised the studio for reaching out for comment from outside sources. So yeah, a lot of my church friends are going to want me to give my thoughts on this film in true Kingdom of Isolation fashion. And I'm gonna do that. I am going to give this the Kingdom of Isolation treatment, even though it's DreamWorks, hence why I've named this series DreamWorks Diaries, and the Kingdom of Isolation is still going to be Disney and Pixar. I'm going to take what I've done in the Kingdom of Isolation and apply it to DreamWorks films here in the DreamWorks Diaries. All good? We caught up? Good. Okay. So, for those that are new, probably wondering, how exactly does this work? How does this Kingdom of Isolation formula work for the DreamWorks Diaries if it's a different series? It's the same formula. I break down the film, I go behind the scenes, couple of gags here and there, do the scores at the end for story, characters, visuals, animation in this case, soundtrack, the legacy the film's left since the film came out, the overall score, where it places on the leaderboard, and then we head home. And then I edit it all together. But the fun part about having this on Patreon, the fun thing about having this on Patreon is I've got to edit this twice. So, yeah. Now, the Patreon version is going to have the movie soundtrack. The YouTube version is going to have Kingdom Hearts. That's just how copyright works, I'm afraid. So, here we go. Given how many of my fellow church friends love this film, I have set myself up to have a very large target on my back if it all goes horribly wrong. So, no pressure then. Nevertheless, here we go. So right out the gate, we're treated to the gorgeous soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, who we last saw in The Kingdom of Isolation during the Summer of Sport during the Paris Olympics in Cool Runnings. And you can hear my thoughts on that particular film in the top right of your screens, alongside all the Kingdom of Isolation episodes I've done so far. Now, I'm going to get very sentimental for a moment here, so bear with me. Getting to see Hans Zimmer live back in November 2025 was unforgettable, especially getting to experience it with my best friend. Hans Zimmer treated the event like a casual get-together with friends just for dinner. Nothing formal. And all I can say is, if you ever get the chance to see Hans Zimmer live or go to a Hans Zimmer concert, like The World of Hans Zimmer, for example, I cannot recommend it enough. So after the DreamWorks logo, we're informed that the film is an adaptation of the Moses story found in the Book of Exodus in the scriptures. And I'm keeping these scriptures by my side throughout this episode. The middle portion of this says it all. While artistic and historical license has been taken, we believe that this film is true to the essence, values, and integrity of a story that is a cornerstone of faith for millions of people worldwide. I've lost count of how many times I've watched this film, and I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. Even for those who aren't religious, regard this as a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. What makes Zimmer's work here especially fascinating is that he approached the score very differently from a typical animated film. Instead of leaning heavily into whimsical or comedic cues, he treated The Prince of Egypt like a live-action epic. And you could argue the same case with The Lion King. Closer in tone to the historical dramas than traditional animation. He also incorporated Middle Eastern musical influences using unusual scales, vocal textures, and instrumentation to give the score a sense of place and authenticity. The use of choir throughout the film, especially in tracks like Deliver Us and The Burning Bush, which we'll get into, don't you worry, adds a spiritual weight that elevates the story beyond standard musical storytelling. We have Hebrew slaves creating building materials, which are then used to build the various building structures and cities across Egypt, giving us the first song of the movie, Deliver Us, written by Stephen Schwartz. So Hans Zimmer did the film score, Stephen Schwartz did the songs. Stevens worked alongside Alan Menken previously on Pocahontas and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And this song is not afraid to go all out right out the gate as to how tough the Hebrews have it every day. The song also acts as a prayer for deliverance, and while all this is happening, an order has been sent out by the Pharaoh to carry out an infanticide, if that's how it's pronounced, to prevent any sort of rebellion from happening. Jochebed hides from the Pharaoh's men with her kids, Miriam, Aaron, and Moses, to try and get Moses safe in particular. Jochebed is voiced by Ofra Haza, who provided the singing vocals for Deliver Us in English as well as 17 other languages, including Hebrew. Now, they make it to the river and get Moses to safety. And that moment as the tears flow is so powerful. One of the most powerful images of the film, and we're barely a few minutes in. A number of obstacles along the way try and stop Moses from making it safely. And then he makes it to Queen Tuya, safe inside the basket. Queen Tuya is voiced here by Dame Helen Mirren, who's won an Oscar for her portrayal as the late Queen Elizabeth II, as well as 3 further nominations for The Madness of King George, Gosford Park, and The Last Station.
Come, Ramesses. We will show Pharaoh your new baby brother.
Fast forward several years, and we have Moses and Ramesses having a chariot race, while Zimmer's score matches the thrilling set piece. High pace, plenty of action, some comedic moments thrown in as well. Case in point.
Hey, Ramesses! How'd you like your face carved on a wall? Someday, yes! How about now?
The music here was part of the World of Hans Zimmer concert I went to on my birthday back in 2024 for the Prince of Egypt suite. The show was fully curated by Zimmer himself, and the best part of the film score is yet to come.
Come on, Moses, admit it, you've always looked up to me.
Yes, but it's not much of a view.
And you can thank Willem Lezebnik for the writing in this film. Time to go through the voices of our adoptive brothers. Ramesses is voiced by Ralph Fiennes, who has 3 Oscar nominations under his belt for Schindler's List, The English Patient, and more recently Conclave, which one of my friends has actually recommended me to watch at some point. And I'll get to it. Now, my generation, of course, will know Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort from the Harry Potter franchise. And he was also just in 28 Years Later in 2025, and then just earlier this year in 2026, its follow-up, The Bone Temple. And then we get to Moses, voiced by the late, great Val Kilmer, Iceman from Top Gun, as well as the Caped Crusader in Batman Forever. Chaos ensues as one of the Pharaoh monuments ends up with a very handsome smile. The nose is knocked off, tying into the legend of the Sphinx, which has no nose. The legend of the nose being knocked off, hence why the Sphinx has no nose. Hence the legend of the Sphinx. One particularly interesting behind-the-scenes detail is that many of the actors recorded their lines together rather than separately, which is very unusual for animated films. This helped create a more natural chemistry between characters, especially between Moses and Ramesses. Val Kilmer in particular was deeply committed to the role, and not only did he voice Moses, but he also provided the voice of God in the burning bush sequence. Again, we'll get to shortly. It was a creative decision that reinforced the idea of a personal internal calling rather than a distant external command. This being a hand-drawn animated film, we also have supervising animators to get through. So, let's rattle through them, shall we? Dolly Brewster for Ramesses, Rodolphe Guenedon for Zipporah and Yocheved, Fabio Legnini for Aaron, Patrick Mate for Hotep and Hoi, Gary Perkovac for Jethro, Bob Scott for Miriam, and finally, Christophe Sarand for Moses and Pharaoh Seti. But how do supervising animators work, I hear you ask? A supervising animator is basically the guardian of a character's performance in an animated film. They're not just animating shots, they're responsible for making sure a character feels consistent, believable, and emotionally real across the entire movie. And examples of these include defining the character's acting style. They decide things like how the character moves, whether they're graceful, stiff, or energetic, facial expressions and emotional range, subtle acting choices, be it hesitation, eye movement, or posture. You could think of them as the actor and acting coach for a drawn character, animating key scenes themselves, which involves them usually handling the most important shots of the film, the big emotional moments, the turning point in the story, the close-ups where acting really matters. These scenes set the gold standard for the rest of the team. And they also lead a team of animators for that respective character. Other animators will work on the same character, and the supervising animator reviews their shots, gives feedback and corrections, ensures everything stays on model and in character. They try and help maintain consistency across the film, and without this role, a character might feel different from scene to scene. The supervising animator makes sure that the personality stays consistent, the movement style doesn't drift, emotional arcs feel coherent, collaborates with directors and other departments, and they work closely with the directors for the story and performance, the storyboard artists, the layout and effects teams, all this so the character fits the overall vision the supervising animator is aiming for. The simple way to think about it is if animation were live action filmmaking. The animator is the actor. The supervising animator is the lead actor and acting director for that character. Why does this matter? This role is a huge reason some animated characters feel alive. When Moses struggles or Ramesses shows in a conflict, that depth comes from a supervising animator shaping every detail of the performance.
You don't think we'll get in trouble for this, do you?
No, not a chance.
Are you sure about that?
Moses takes responsibility for the day's events as he and Ramesses are told off by Pharaoh Seti, voiced by Sir Patrick Stewart, who was last seen in the Kingdom of Isolation as the Great Prince in Bambi 2.
One weak link can break the chain of a mighty dynasty.
Such power in that one line from Patrick Stewart's voice acting. Moses comforts Ramesses later by telling him he cares too much, after they both drench Hotep and Hui, voiced by Steve Martin and Martin Short, respectively. Now, Steve Martin has had one of those rare careers where he's bounced effortlessly between absurd comedy, heartfelt drama, and even voice acting. If you trace his film work, you can see him evolve from wild and crazy comic to a more nuanced, versatile performer. In his early film years, Martin leaned heavily into his offbeat comedic persona. Movies like The Jerk turned him into a breakout movie star, showcasing his signature absurdity, while Dead Men Don't Wear played, and The Man with Two Brains cemented his reputation for clever, surreal humor. Around the same time, he proved he could handle more grounded roles, starring in All of Me, where his physical comedy was balanced with emotional depth. By the late 80s and early 90s, Martin began taking on more mature and family-oriented roles. In Planes, Trains and Automobiles, alongside John Candy, for example, he delivered one of his most beloved performances, blending frustration, vulnerability, and humor. He continued this shift with films like Father of the Bride and its sequels, where he played a relatable, anxious dad, and Roxanne, a modern romantic take on Cyrano de Bergerac that he also wrote. Martin also explored dramatic territory, notably in Grand Canyon and later in Shop Girl, an adaptation of his own novella, where he played a more subdued, introspective character. These roles showed a quieter, more reflective side of his acting. And in the 2000s, he remained a strong presence in mainstream and family films, starring in hits like Cheaper by the Dozen and bringing his comedic time into a new generation. He would also later work with DreamWorks on Home, and has also taken on the roles of Inspector Jacques Clouseau in The Pink Panther. I would like to buy a hamburger! Made a guest appearance on The Simpsons, and as alongside Selena Gomez and his Prince of Egypt co-star Martin Short in Only Murders in the Building. So across decades, Steve Martin's film roles reflect a rare balance. He's been the outrageous comedian, the romantic lead, the everyman father, and the thoughtful dramatist, all while maintaining the sharp wit that made him famous in the first place. So to say Steve has range would be an understatement. Steve Martin has actually made an appearance in the Kingdom of Isolation as well, believe it or not, because he was one of the celebrity cameos in Fantasia 2000. And that range is all taken into account, considering that he has an Emmy for the Smothers Brothers comedy album, and he won an honorary Oscar in 2014. Martin, on the other hand, has appeared in The Kingdom previously, not only as Ben in Treasure Planet, but also Lars in 101 Dalmatians too. The boys are late for the banquet, but Moses assures Ramesses that nobody's gonna notice they're late. They're gonna be fine.
Nobody will even notice.
Yeah, that's code for you were saying? Ramesses is now Prince Regent, overseeing all the temples. No pressure. Moses proposes that Hotep and Hoi pay tribute to Ramesses, so they offer up the Median Girl.
By the power of Ra.
And it's not the first time we're going to be hearing them say that in the film. The Median Girl is Zipporah, voiced by Michelle Pfeiffer in her animated debut. She also has 3 Oscar nominations to her name: Dangerous Liaisons, The Fabulous Baker Boys, and Love Field. She's been in the MCU as in Quantumania, but my personal favorite role is when she was in Dangerous Minds. Safe to say, Zipporah, she's feisty before Moses puts her in her place.
You will show the proper respect for a prince of Egypt. Roll credits.
Ramesses then wants her dried off and sent to Moses' chamber. Oh boy!
FBI, open up!
He then appoints Moses as royal chief architect, who then goes to his chambers to find someone else tied up, as well as the dogs, because Zipporah is trying to escape the palace. She gets some water from Miriam and Aaron, voiced by Sandra Bullock and Jeff Goldblum respectively. Sandra has an Oscar for The Blind Side and also has a further nomination for Gravity, while Jeff Goldblum has a nomination for the short film Little Surprises, as well as being part of the Jurassic Park franchise. Miriam is elated that Moses has returned, only for things to sour very quickly, leading to this piece of revelation.
Ask the man that you call father.
Miriam then sings the lullaby their mother sang as he was sent down the river in a basket, giving us the same imagery from earlier, only it's Miriam shedding the tears this time, leading to a very powerful performance by Amick Byram of All I Ever Wanted. The mixture of vulnerability at the start before power takes over is what I love about this moment in the film.
And if anybody doubts it, they couldn't be more wrong.
We then get the hieroglyphics coming to life as Moses has a nightmare about what Pharaoh Seti did when he was younger. It's an amazing animated sequence, and the music matches the intensity really well. He then finds the hieroglyphics that match the nightmare he had and needs confirmation from Pharaoh Seti, asking and begging, "Please tell me you didn't do this."
Sacrifices must be made.
What happens next is the breaking point of the relationship between Moses and Pharaoh Seti.
They were only slaves.
The way Moses' eyes widen and the music becoming very unsettling is, for lack of a better term, biblical. We then get the Queen's reprise of All I Ever Wanted as she tries to comfort Moses, especially after the previous night's events. Later that day, while Ramesses goes through his vision of wanting the temple to be more grand than before, Moses is becoming more and more unsettled at what he is seeing, especially when he sees Miriam and Aaron working as well. Moses stops the slave from being whipped anymore by the slave driver, only for this to happen. Leading to Moses running away in exile, despite Ramesses' pleas to stay. This is another phenomenal piece of storytelling, combined with the score from Zilla, punctuating the moment.
Go ask the man I once called father.
And with that, Moses runs off into the desert. Another amazing animation sequence unfolds here, showing Moses getting smaller and smaller as we zoom out more, showing how alone he is in the desert. I will never understand why Disney never wanted to make this when just 2 years before, in 1996, they made The Hunchback of Notre Dame and have never made anything as bold since. A camel finds Moses, albeit by his hair, in the desert, and he soon falls into a well where he's reunited with Zipporah. Only to be dropped back into the well.
That's why Papa says she'll never get married.
Let's see how well that ages. Jethro welcomes Moses with open arms after Moses is washed down. Jethro is voiced here by Danny Glover, who was just in the last entry, the last entry of the DreamWorks Diaries in Ants. We then get a wonderful get together that evening, and the next song, Through Heaven's Eyes, performed by Brian Stokes Mitchell. Very uplifting, especially after what we've been through beforehand. A story someone told me not too long ago regarding this particular song and FSY. Stay with me on this one. They performed the song, I think, at the mini FSY variety show, and then got to perform it again for the youth during the FSY week as well. James Earl Jones was considered for the role of Jethro. Oh, could you imagine James Earl Jones? Oh my word. Jeremy Irons considered for the role of Seti. Jennifer Aniston considered for the role of Zipporah. Cheech Martin and Rob Paulson, Mr. Nations of the World, were considered for the role of Hotep, while Tommy Chong and Jeff Bennett were considered for the role of Hoy. Two dynamic duos there, Cheech and Chong, Rob Paulson and Jeff Bennett. Oh my word, what a great combination those would have been. Those two, Cheech and Chong, Rob and Jeff, they were busy with Disney Toon Studios. They were making those direct-to-video sequels. Moses then gets married to Zipporah. Yeah, that didn't age very well. What was it I said earlier? That's why she'll never get married? That didn't age well, did it? And then soon afterwards, we get one of the three best scenes of the film. Moses is trying to get one of his sheep back to the flock, leading to the burning bush. This is my favorite part of the entire film score. And I'm not just saying that lightly, genuinely. This is my favorite part of the film score. No amount of words will ever be enough to describe how beautiful this was to hear live at the World of Hans Zimmer. And come October, I'll get to experience it again. Anybody want to go with me in Glasgow? Let me know in the comments. The burning bush sequence was one of the film's most carefully crafted moments, both technically and artistically, because it needed to feel spiritual, mysterious, and unlike anything else in the movie. To achieve this, the filmmakers combined traditional hand-drawn animation with digital effects. The base of the scene, Moses, the mountain, and the environment was all animated by hand, maintaining the film's painterly stylized look. And on top of that, the fire itself was created using CGI, allowing the flames to move in a more fluid, ethereal way than traditional animation alone could achieve. The goal wasn't realistic fire, but something otherworldly. A flame that felt alive and symbolic rather than destructive. What really sets the sequence apart is the integration of imagery within the flames. As God speaks, the fire subtly forms shifting shapes, including suggestions of faces and flowing patterns created through layered digital compositing. These effects were carefully timed with the animation and sound design, so the fire feels like it's communicating, not just burning.
The voice of God was another key creative decision. Instead of using a
Booming external voice.
the filmmakers chose to have the voice of Moses, Val Kilmer, also provide the voice of God. This created a more intimate internal experience, as if the divine message is coming from within Moses himself. And I admire that creative decision. The audio was layered and processed to give a resonant, slightly otherworldly quality without losing the human connection. Finally, the sequence's power comes from restraint. The animators avoided overcomplicating the visuals, using the minimal movement, strong lighting contrast, and the deliberate pacing to draw focus to the interaction between Moses and the flame. The result is a scene that feels quiet, sacred, and deeply personal. Standing in contrast to the film's larger, more spectacle-driven moments like the Red Sea, which we'll get into later. Put together, the burning bush sequence is a perfect example of how the film blended technology, performance, and artistic intention to create something emotionally and spiritually impactful.
I am that I am.
Now, on my most recent viewing, I got a little bit choked up during this whole sequence, proving how powerful moments like this can be when handled with care. Moses tries to convince God that he chose the wrong messenger.
Who made man's mouth?
God reassures Moses that he will be with him every step of the way as Moses heads back to Ramesses after telling Zipporah what happened to him. Take notes, Disney. This is how you do moments like this. You let the music tell the story. You don't have any dialogue over it. Zipporah is concerned for the fact that Moses is just one person. Moses comforts and reassures her with this.
They are free. They have a future. That is what I want for my people.
Zipporah then decides to travel with him. The imagery of the slaves cross-faded with Moses and Zipporah traveling is another powerful image, especially when it all leads to him reuniting with Ramesses, who is naturally elated to see Moses again. Ramesses pardons Moses of all the crimes he's been accused of before Moses shows the power of God. We soon get the next song of the film, Playing with the Big Boys. The lighting, shadows, and music are all phenomenal throughout, definitely raising the stakes for what's to come soon. Moses tries to convince Ramesses to let his people go, where we also get one of the most powerful moments from Ramesses, all in like less than a minute, with that ring that he gave Moses after appointing him architect. This is the moment that Ramesses snaps, claiming he doesn't know God and that he will not be freeing slaves.
I will not be the weak link.
Another amazing moment from Ray Fiennes here. I'd love to see him do more voice acting in the future. Ramesses doubles the workload of the slaves, leading to Moses being chastised by Aaron before Miriam tells Aaron off for his words against Moses. It's time to unleash the first of the 10 plagues as a number of the slaves join Moses at the riverbank. The first plague, the river turning into blood. This scares the gods before Hotep and Hoi make their own blood. To reassure Ramesses, there's nothing to worry about, this is gonna be fine.
Abandon this futile mission, Moses. I've indulged you long enough.
We then get to, for me, the best song of the film. The Burning Bush is my favorite part of the score. The Plagues is my favorite song of the film. We see the rest of the plagues play out over this moment of absolute cinema. The frogs, the lice, the livestock pestilence, the flies, the hail and fire, the locusts, the boils, and then the darkness, leaving just one plague left, the angel of death, the
death of the firstborn. Some have pointed out that the plagues come in the wrong order in the film. Remember what I pointed out earlier? Artistic license. But for the benefit of those who want to know what order the plagues actually came in the book of Exodus, here we go. You start with the plague of blood in the river. Then you get the plague of frogs. Then you get the plague of lice. Then you get the plague of flies. Then you get the plague of the livestock pestilence. Then you get the plague of boils. And then you get the plague of the hail and the fire. Then you get the plague of locusts. And then you get the plague of darkness before the plague of death. Anubis, one of the deities mentioned in Play with the Big Boys, by the way, is also known as a god of death in Egyptian mythology. The plagues, so the plagues sequence was one of the most visually experimental of the film. Blair Woods. The filmmakers leaned heavily into stylization here, using dramatic lighting, abstract imagery, and rapid transitions to convey chaos and divine power. Interestingly, this sequence pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in a family animated film at the time. DreamWorks reportedly had internal debates about how intense the imagery could be. And for an epic like this, understandable, especially with elements like the boils, the darkness, and the destruction before settling on a version that was impactful without being overly graphic.
All the innocent who suffer from your stubbornness and pride.
Another amazing moment of animation where the reds and oranges only show the anger and vengeance in Ramesses' eyes as he remains on his throne, refusing to move his stance while all this destruction is happening around him. Amik's vocal work during this particular moment of the song is for me one of the best moments of the entire soundtrack.
Let my people go.
But if you thought that was impressive, wait till you hear what Ralph Fiennes brings to the table. He didn't come into the Prince of Egypt with a background as a trained singer in a traditional sense. His roots are very much in classical theatre and dramatic acting, not musical performance or musical theatre. Before voicing and singing as Ramesses, Ralph Fiennes was best known for intense dramatic roles in films like Schindler's List and The English Patient, which I mentioned earlier, and he got Oscar nominations for those roles. However, his stage experience with the Royal Shakespeare Company gave him something just as important: strong vocal control, projection, and emotional delivery, all crucial for singing in character. In theatre, especially Shakespeare, actors are trained to use rhythm, cadence, and vocal dynamics in a way that's actually quite close to musical performance. That background helped Fiennes transition into songs like The Plagues, where the performance relies less on polished vocal technique and more on dramatic intensity and storytelling through the voice. So while he wasn't a seasoned musical singer beforehand, he brought classically trained voice control, experience performing heightened poetic language, and emotional expressiveness suited to musical storytelling. That combination made his performance as Ramesses feel powerful and authentic, even without a traditional singing resume.
You who I call brother, how could you have come to hate me so?
You wouldn't believe he hasn't done any singing prior to this, but just like his Shakespearean background has shown here, the power and the control he has during his entire performance as Ramesses is why he was perfect for this role. The warm colors from Moses contrasting the coldness of Ramesses work beautifully as Moses tries one more time to convince Ramesses to let the slaves go. Despite being critical of some of Moses' actions when they were younger, Ramesses reminisces on the good times that they shared together.
Why can't things be the way they were before?
All the hallmarks of a Shakespearean tragedy character here. The final nail in that coffin is about to be nailed in. Ralph again shows why he is a phenomenal actor.
There shall be a great cry in all of Egypt.
The final plague, again, the plague of death, the death of the firstborn, angel of death. This can be prevented by slaying the lamb and spreading its blood over the doors. And this will prevent the plague from entering the home and smiting the firstborns. Some adhere to this, some don't, and the consequences are absolutely devastating. No music or dialogue in this moment, just the story and the animation of the moment. The firstborns are gone, including Ramesses' son, finally convincing him to free the slaves. Now, animating the final plague sequence, the death of the firstborn, was less about technical difficulty alone and more about emotional and artistic precision under tight constraints. It's widely considered one of the most delicate scenes the team had to handle. The filmmakers made a deliberate choice not to show anything explicit. Instead, the Angel of Death is represented by a soft flowing blue mist moving silently through the city. That effect was created by combining hand-drawn animation and digital compositing, similar to other effects in the film. But here, the challenge was making the motion feel intentional and almost sentient without becoming frightening in a graphic way. From an animation standpoint, that meant carefully choreographing the mist's movement so it felt guided and not random, using lighting and shadow to imply what was happening inside homes rather than showing it. Timing everything precisely with the music and silence to build the tension. One of the hardest parts wasn't drawing the scene, it was getting the tone right. The team consulted religious advisors from Jewish, Christian, and Muslim black backgrounds throughout the production to ensure the moment was handled with respect. They had to walk a fine line, conveying the gravity of the event while keeping the film appropriate for a broad audience. There were also storytelling challenges. For example, the moment the mist passes over the Hebrew homes had to be instantly readable and emotionally clear, even with minimal dialogue. That required strong visual symbolism and pacing, not complex action. So while it may not have been the most technically complex sequence in terms of raw animation labor, it was arguably one of the hardest to execute successfully because every artistic choice carried emotional, cultural, and narrative weight.
Leave me.
What also works so well is the color is practically washed out here, emphasizing the tragedy that Ramesses has just suffered, the death of his son. Moses is just as devastated at what happened as the slaves join him, and we get the final song of the film, not including the credits, When You Believe, which would win Best Original Song at the Oscars, thanks to Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston's rendition over the end credits, even if the two of them reportedly never got along during the recording of the song. Now, the number of stories I've heard about Mariah Carey's diva behavior just confirm this story. Miriam, is this really the time for show tunes? All the firstborns are dead! The original lyrics, "You can do miracles when you believe," were changed to there can be miracles when you believe, to avoid the implication that you, not God, can work the miracles. This song and scene is so liberating to witness, especially as we approach the final 10 minutes of the film. Even if this is another moment that I got misty-eyed over. The recording of When You Believe is almost as legendary as the song itself. While Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston both delivered powerhouse performances, they actually recorded their parts separately. Their vocals were later blended together in post-production. A common practice, but one that adds an interesting layer given the story surrounding the recording process. Everyone makes it to the Red Sea with Ramesses and his guards in hot pursuit. Now we get to how the Red Sea sequence was put together. So, here we go. Always keep hydrated, kids. Always keep hydrated. Especially when you're doing recording sessions like this. So, the parting of the Red Sea was one of the most ambitious and technically demanding sequences in the entire film. It took years of planning, experimentation, and collaboration to get right. From the start, the filmmakers knew this moment had to feel awe-inspiring and believable, not just visually impressive. To achieve that, they combined traditional hand-drawn animation with cutting-edge CGI, something that was still relatively new for animated films at the time. The environment, characters, and much of the staging were drawn by hand, but the walls of water were created using CG effects. A dedicated team of around a dozen artists worked on this sequence for nearly 3 years, developing complex simulations to make the water move with weight and realism. They studied real ocean footage and fluid dynamics to understand how water behaves, then pushed it further to give it a towering, almost supernatural presence. One of the most striking details is the semi-transparent walls of water, where you can see hints of sea life moving inside. This wasn't just for spectacle, it helped sell the scale and added a sense of tension as if the ocean could collapse at any moment. Achieving that meant layering multiple elements, the animated textures, the lighting effects, and the digital compositing, all carefully synchronized. Lighting played a huge role as well. The artists used cool blue tones and shifting highlights to give the water depth and motion while contrasting it with the warm torchlight of the fleeing Hebrews. Every frame had to balance clarity with drama so the audience could follow the action while still feeling overwhelmed by the scale. And then there's the collapse of the sea itself. This required even more complex animation, blending hand-drawn character reactions with fully simulated water crashing back into place. Timing was everything in this sequence. The animators had to match the motion of the waves with the music and editing so the moment landed with maximum emotional impact. In the end, the sequence became a landmark in animation because it perfectly fused artistry and technology. It wasn't just about something big, it was about making the audience feel the miracle. Which is why the Red Sea scene still stands as one of the most iconic moments in animated film history. Another challenge the team faced was rendering the water in a way that felt both realistic and symbolic, because at the time, CGI water was still evolving, and achieving the scale required for this scene pushed the limits of available technology at the time. The animators didn't just want the water to look real, they wanted it to feel alive. That's why the walls of water subtly move and shift, almost like breathing, reinforcing the idea that this is not just nature, but a miracle in motion. 4 minutes taking nearly 3 years to put together. This is why people need to be patient with when it comes to animated films. They do take time to make. They can't exactly be Rome. They can't exactly do a Rome built in a day and then you get the sequel the following day. They can't exactly do that. They make it across the Red Sea, which closes before Ramesses can make it across as well.
Goodbye, brother.
We then finished the film with Moses holding the Ten Commandments, which was also a 1956 film starring Charlton Heston, and a huge inspiration for this adaptation for the story from Exodus. The final image of Moses with the Ten Commandments also reflects one of the film's biggest inspirations, the epic scale and reverence of classic biblical cinema, particularly the Ten Commandments. In many ways, The Prince of Egypt was DreamWorks proving that animation can handle the same level of thematic weight and grandeur as live-action epics, and arguably it succeeded in ways few films have since. And now, time for the scores. No pressure. Definitely no pressure. The story, I'm going to give an 11. The story earns top marks not just for scale, but for respect. Drawing from the Book of Exodus, the film walks a careful line between adaptation and interpretation, and nails it. What stands out is how it keeps the core themes of faith, identity, and redemption intact, while shaping the narrative into something cinematic and emotionally accessible. The relationship between Moses and Ramesses adds a deeply personal layer that isn't as prominent in scripture, but enhances the drama without undermining the source material. And crucially, the filmmakers didn't treat this as just another animated movie. They treated it with reverence. The consultation with hundreds of religious experts shows, and it results in a film that feels spiritually grounded rather than loosely inspired. The characters I'm also giving an 11. This is where the film really flexes. The casting is nothing short of elite, but two performances stand above even that. Ralph Fiennes delivers one of the most layered antagonists in animation history. He's not a villain in a traditional sense. He's proud, conflicted, wounded, and tragically human. Every line feels like it carries weight. And then Val Kilmer as Moses. He brings a quiet strength and vulnerability that adds beautifully over the course of the film. The decision to also have him voice God adds an extra layer of intimacy that is genuinely inspired. And then you've got a supporting cast that is just stacked. Every role feels purposeful. Every voice performance adds texture. And there's no weak links here to break that chain. Because if anything, that chain is just getting stronger because the visuals are getting an 11 as well. This is where the film goes from great to legendary. 3 sequences alone justify this score. The burning bush, visually restrained but spiritually overwhelming. The way the flames move and communicate is unlike anything else in animation. The plagues, bold, stylized, almost operatic. The use of color and shadow turns it into pure visual storytelling. And finally, the Red Sea. Still one of the most ambitious sequences ever put to animation. The scale, the movement, the transparency of the water. It's not just impressive, it's timeless. The blend of hand-drawn animation and early CG isn't just technical, it's artistic. Every frame feels intentional. The soundtrack, 4th 11 in a row. Hans Zimmer absolutely understood the assignment and then went beyond it. The score doesn't treat this like an animated film. It treats it like a biblical epic. The use of choir and cultural instrumentation, the thematic layering gives the film a sense of scale and spirituality that few scores ever achieve. And then there were the songs by Stephen Schwartz. Deliver us a powerful opening statement. The Plagues, easily one of the most intense musical sequences in animation. And When You Believe. It's iconic for a reason. The Oscar win for Best Original Song was fully deserved, and honestly, the entire soundtrack could have been recognized. And it did, because The Legacy gets an 11 as well. And I'll leave you guys to work out the scores for a moment. let's really dig into the legacy of this film, because this film's impact goes far beyond just it did well. On a $70 million budget, it accumulated $218.6 million at the box office. It was a strong commercial success as a result, especially for a non-Disney animated film at the time. Critical reception, slightly lower, 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, with a consensus reading The Prince of Egypt's stunning visuals and first-rate voice cast more than compensate for the fact that it's better crafted than it is emotionally involving. Firm disagreement there on that one, because this film absolutely lands emotionally. Now, the film also had a serious presence during awards season, even going up against some very, very heavy hitters. So we're going to get the Oscars out of the way first, since we just had them this past Sunday at time of recording. So, 2 nominations. Best Original and Comedy Score, losing out to Shakespeare in Love, which shockingly beat Saving Private Ryan to Best Picture. And Best Original Song for When You Believe, which it won! 2 Golden Globe nominations as well, for Best Original Score, losing out to The Truman Show, and Best Original Song, again for When You Believe, losing out to The Prayer, which was performed by Celine Dion and Andrea Bocelli from Quest for Camelot. Anybody remember that one? I'm showing my age. It got 3 Grammy nominations as well. Soundtrack, album, and song written for visual media, losing out to Tarzan and Austin Powers, respectively, in those 2 categories. It also got nominated for a pop contemporary gospel album Grammy, but it did lose out to Speechless. No, Disney fans, not the Naomi Scott song from the Aladdin remake. It got 5 Annie nominations, which is basically the animation version of the Oscars. It lost in all of the categories it was nominated in to The Iron Giant, which in it, a film that in itself became a cult classic in its own right. Now, this all goes beyond just this original film, because we got a prequel as well, Joseph King of Dreams, which we're going to cover in the next couple of entries into the DreamWorks Diaries. It got a stage adaptation. This film got a stage adaptation, which premiered in 2017, and even had to close, unfortunately, during the pandemic. But it did get recorded and released. A production of the musical got released in 2023, not just in theaters, but also on home media as well. I need to get around to watching it at some point. But here's why the legacy still matters for this film. Even with the losses in the during awards season, look what it was up against. Truman Show, Shakespeare in Love. It was up against prestige dramas like the Truman Show. It was up against Shakespearean romance with Shakespeare in Love. It was up against Disney's Tarzan during the Renaissance, and it was also up against cult animation giants like the Iron Giant. And The Prince of Egypt still held its ground in every category. More importantly, though, it changed the conversation around animation. It proved that animated films could tackle religious and historical epics, and you could balance artistry, faith, and mainstream appeal. DreamWorks could go toe-to-toe with Disney, not by copying them, but by doing something completely different. So, in closing with the legacy portion of this entry, awards or not, the film didn't fade. It endured. It studied, remembered, rewatched, and for a lot of people, myself included, it's deeply personal. And that's something no award can measure. And honestly, losing to films like The Truman Show, Tarzan, Shakespeare in Love, and The Iron Giant, it doesn't weaken its legacy. It cements the era that it belonged to. An era where it stood shoulder to shoulder with some of the most iconic films ever made. And never once felt out of place. So, the score is a 110%. And it joins that elusive club. Alongside Beauty and the Beast, Winnie the Pooh, Ratatouille, Inside Out 1 and 2. It's the 6th film on my channel to get that elusive 110%. And the first from DreamWorks Animation to do so. The Prince of Egypt, it earns that elusive 110% because it didn't just succeed in every category, it elevates them. It's not just one of the greatest animated films ever made. It's one of the greatest films ever made, full stop. And I don't use that very often. So if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, or if you haven't watched it for a while, can't recommend it enough. Especially now that I've done this deep dive into this masterpiece. So that is it for this entry into the DreamWorks Diaries. If you enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up, and if you want to help me write these DreamWorks Diaries, you can hit the subscribe button down at the bottom, click the bell, turn on notifications so you don't miss when the next entry is written. The next entry, oh boy. We're definitely going to be showing It's Tough to Be a God because we are heading on
the road to El Dorado.
But until then, make each moment count, and I'll see you guys next time for another entry into the DreamWorks Diaries.